My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a member of Al-Anon. My AA home group is Group 12 in San Antonio. My Al-Anon home group is the Front Range Al-Anon group, which is an online group. Now, tonight, there are going to be lots of disclaimers before we start. This is not an AA meeting. This is not part of the AA fellowship. It's not an Al-Anon meeting. It's not a CODA meeting. This is not affiliated with or endorsed by any 12-step fellowships. It's just me on the screen, my big face talking at you. That's all it is. I'm just someone who's in a bunch of fellowships who's going to be sharing their experience. If it helps, that's wonderful. If it doesn't help, that's fine. No one need to have any argument. Part of the reason I say that is because my story is one great big mess of AA, of Al-Anon, and of all sorts of other things. And it's very, very difficult to disentangle the different parts. When I'm in AA, I generally don't let on I'm in Al-Anon. When I'm in an Al-Anon meeting, I generally don't let on I'm in AA. I try and speak the language of the fellowship that I'm in. Since we're outside the scope of both, I can speak more freely today. And one further disclaimer, the big book is not a piece of Al-Anon conference approved literature. Al-Anon, quite rightly, its conscience is to preserve the integrity of the Al-Anon message by having conference approved literature and only using conference approved literature in formal named Al-Anon meetings. So if one is going to talk about questions of being a friend or a family member of an alcoholic and refer to the big book, well, it must not be under the Al-Anon label. But outside that, I can mention that I'm in Al-Anon. And so what I'm going to talk about this evening is how the big book can be used to help people in Al-Anon understand alcoholism. And also, I've got a messy old program and a messy old step one, because I've taken bits from all sorts of different places. So I'm going to talk about how the dreaded word codependency, which we're going to talk about. We're going to define that. I'll use a definition which works for me. There are lots of definitions out there. So this could be useful for people in Al-Anon, in S-Anon, in CODA, maybe in other fellowships. Maybe it will be useful for people in AA. Occasionally, I have an opinion on an outside issue. And one of the opinions on an outside issue I occasionally have is there are a few people in AA that could probably handle an Al-Anon meeting or two occasionally. So even if you're just an AA member who is here by accident, maybe there'll be something which is helpful to you. Anonism, I've got friends in Al-Anon, I've got friends in S-Anon. S-Anon is to SA, Sexaholics Anonymous, as Al-Anon is to AA. So S-Anon and Al-Anon, that in lots of countries that the people know each other, so they sometimes go to each other's meetings because the fellowships are small. Anonism is a term lots of us use for being an Al-Anon, being an S-Anon, being a Nar-Anon if it's Narcotics Anonymous. So that's the Anonism. That's pretty simple. It's if you're someone in your family or a friend is an alcoholic or affected by alcoholism or addiction in another. You've then got codependency, and that's I think that's what they call a $10 word. If you read the codependency, I'm not a member of CODA, so I'm not going to share any opinions on the Fellowship of CODA. It's none of my business. But I've read some codependency books. I've dealt with my own codependency. When you read codependency writers, each one gives a different definition, and it gets real confusing. So one definition which I find really helpful is an insufficient focus on one's own beliefs, attitudes, values, thoughts, actions, internal world and external world, and an excessive focus on someone else's beliefs, values, attitudes, thoughts, feelings, internal world, external world. It's being all tangled up in someone else's life and not looking after your own. And if you're in Al-Anon, that might ring a bell. That might sound a lot like an Alanonism or S-Anonism or Anonism. So I'm going to put them under the same heading for my purposes. There's no distinction. It's not like I have like an Al-Anon brain and an alcoholic brain and a codependent brain, and they're like three separate systems. I've just got one brain. But first of all, there may be some people here that weren't here last week. There may be, certainly, I can see there are some people from Al-Anon and from S-Anon who certainly won't have been here for the AA side of things, the AA and drug side of things last week. So I'm going to run through first of all, and this will be a repetition from last week. So if you were here last week, go and grab the National Enquirer or something. Just find something fun to read for 10 minutes whilst I recap what we did last week. So the big book is super helpful in understanding, I think, is super helpful in understanding alcoholism. Your reference pages, if you want to get your head around what alcoholism is everything up to page 44. Top of page 44, it's going to give us a nice definition of alcoholism. Let me just get the document up in front of me, and I'm going to try and share it on the screen. I don't know if I'll be able to share. Maybe the hosts can make me a co-host so I can do that. Just give me a sec. Share screen. Oh yes, I can do it. Marvelous. There we go. So in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And this is what the definition is going to be. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if, when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So we've got a couple of elements there. There's what happens after, and I'm going to talk about alcoholics in the third party rather than myself. It's what the alcoholic looks like from the outside. I've been in AA since 1993. I've been in Al-Anon since 1995. And I've been in Al-Anon since 1995 because I've been in AA since 1993. I couldn't have stayed in AA if I hadn't gone to Al-Anon, because I came with Alanonism preloaded. There were lots of alcoholics in my childhood, addicts and all sorts of other things. And then in my drinking years, there were certainly lots of alcoholics. At the moment, I think there are 1,600 people in my phone, and about 1,500 have got serious problems. So, I'm fully qualified for Al-Anon. So I'm going to be talking about alcoholics and addicts from the outside. So pardon me for that, but that's the point of this. That's the point of this talk. While I'm looking at the alcoholics and addicts in my life, those are the two features I'm looking at. First of all, when they start drinking, there is absolutely no controlling both three things. Number one, the quantity that they drink. They won't tell you the truth. So even if you come to a deal with them, there was one I used to come to a deal with about how much he was going to drink. He would sneak drinks on the side. It cannot be controlled through negotiation, manipulation, pleading, pity, any of those things. The beast is running the show. The beast is not the alcoholic. The beast is the victim. The alcoholic is the victim of the beast as much as you are. The beast is running the show. Also, what they do when drinking cannot be controlled either. I remember a 6-week holiday in a tent with an alcoholic in 1991. It was a big tent, but nonetheless, it was a tent. So we were stuck on campsites all around Europe. And every night it was Russian roulette as to how much he was going to drink, what he was going to do when drunk, whether he was going to get angry, whether he was going to get aggressive, whether he was going to threaten violence. I thought that he was angry at me. He wasn't. He was angry already. He was angry before I ever met him, but it would come out when he was drinking. I thought if I behaved nicely, I could stop him being angry when he was drunk. No amount of nice behavior can keep the beast under control. Once they've had a drink, all bets are off. The second part of this, they're going to have a drink. Maybe not now, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but if they're an alcoholic and they're untreated, they're going to drink again. And this is the message. Just because they've stopped for a bit, you want to throw a party. Oh, hooray, we're home dry. No. Or maybe no. It's going to take a while. They've got to be left be for quite a while after they get sober. The background noises will stop shortly, hopefully. Someone doing their job. God bless them. So the relevant parts, if you're an Al-Anon, it will really help to read the big book, particularly the first 3 chapters, Bill's story. There is a solution, more about alcoholism, the doctor's opinion, and a vision for you, just to understand quite how little choice the alcoholic in an untreated condition has over the first drink, and then how little control they have after the first drink, and how little control they have of their behavior. Is that I always thought in vino veritas, when they're drinking, the truth comes out. There may be grains of truth in what they're saying, but you take the truth and you contaminate it with alcoholism, and it turns into something else. I don't know if anyone has seen those exorcism films. There are lots of exorcism films. And in the exorcism film, the person who is possessed knows all of the secrets of the priest who is trying to perform the exorcism, and twists the truth to make it hurt. Now, just because the grains of truth that the demon which has possessed the person are true, doesn't mean what is spewing out of the possessed person's mouth is true. It's a distortion. The monster is in control. Tom always says that alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. And if you're an Al-Anon, you're in the cage with the gorilla and the alcoholic. And if you get in between the gorilla and the alcoholic, you're going to get your arms and legs yanked off, and not by the gorilla, by the alcoholic. I've spent some of the unhappiest months of my life trying to separate an alcoholic and drug addict from alcohol and pills and all sorts of other things. If your experiences with some alcoholics are just really out in the open, but my experience with pill addicts is there's a lot of really covert stuff going on. It's really obvious when someone has had a drink because you can smell it. It's not always obvious when someone has taken a pill. And here's the weird thing. You'd think with all of my experience of alcoholics and addicts, I'd have a really acute sense of when someone has taken a pill and what they've taken. I don't. I have an extraordinary blind spot All of the non-alcoholics around me can tell that the person has taken a pill. I can't. That's part of my Alanonism, my inability to see what is plainly the case in front of me. I'm just going to move the computer. Just give me a couple of minutes. I might be able to find a quieter place. So we've got two elements. We've got two chief elements of alcoholism. If they're an alcoholic, they're going to start drinking again unless they have a. You see, so this is the other thing about the early chapters. What it makes really clear is page 26 is really helpful. There's a story about an alcoholic who goes to see Carl Jung, who was one of the foremost psychiatrists of the 20th century, and he's in great physical shape, he's in great mental shape, but he relapses anyway. So just because your alcoholic is now doing yoga in Pilates and has seen, a psychotherapist and is showing up at work doesn't mean they're not going to relapse. That's fooled me in the past. There's got to be a fundamental rearrangement within them, and that's not something another human being can effect as an act of the will. So what I've learned over the many years that I've been in recovery and been surrounded by alcoholics and addicts is the process has a dynamic and a momentum of its own. Another thing which is very interesting is part of my Al-Anonism. This is all going to get a bit muddled, but whatever. Part of my Al-Anonism is that I will try and help alcoholics and addicts while they're still in the process of figuring out whether or not they want to recover and how. And I will help and I will help and I will help, and when they fall over, I will pick them up. I used to, I don't anymore. I can't tell you how often the point at which they start to get well is the point at which I let go completely and stop mopping up the messes they've created, where I stop patting the damp little hands saying, there, you've tried so hard, we're so proud of you for coming back. I got into recovery at the age of 21. Do you want to know why? It's because everyone let go. I couldn't get any money off the state. I couldn't get any proper psychiatric or psychotherapeutic help. For lots of reasons, I won't go into the details, but that wasn't happening. My parents had no money. They were in a different part of the country. I behaved so badly during my drinking. None of my friends wanted anything to do with me. There was no one left. On the first day I went to AA in 1993, I had an extraordinary experience at the meeting, and I wanted to tell someone. And I looked through my phone book, desperate to find someone to tell that I'd gone to AA. And the only person I could find who I could phone and not get shouted at was someone I hadn't seen for years. And years is a long time when you're 21. Because there was literally no one left who was willing to pick up the pieces. If there'd been anyone who'd been willing to buy me, I'd run out of money. That's a big reason why I came to AA. I literally didn't have the money to drink. If one person had lent me given me £5 for a bottle of Cinzano, I would have taken it and drunk it and not called AA. When everyone let go, I got well. A very close friend of mine had a very bad relapse many years ago. And he only reached out for help when I let go and some other people let go. That's when he phoned the treatment center in Texas and flew to Texas and got in there. For the months before that, all the helping wasn't helping, which is why Anne Lamott says, don't get your help all over people. Help is the sunny side of control. If you want to hear the Al-Anon side from an alcoholic, listen to Don P. There are some alcoholics in his family. And he had a family member who was alcoholic, and he talks very openly in lots of talks about this, that they set a boundary with the kid and said, you can't come in. If you're drunk, you can't come in. And this was Colorado in the winter. Look it up on Wikipedia if you don't know what that means in terms of weather and climatic conditions, but it's rough, right? See someone in Omaha nodding, they'll know this as well. The motto is this: if you let go, they might die, but they might get well. If you don't let go, they're definitely going to die. Because the helper, the little helper with the Hoover and the nutritious meals is what is stopping them from hitting the rock bottom that they need to hit. So when I'm working with a newcomer, my heart sinks if they're on benefits, if the family are involved, if anyone is still helping, if someone is paying their rent. When I was new in AA, I had to stay where meetings were, where recovery was. This was 1993, so no internet to speak of. Certainly no recovery online. My parents lived in a place with -2 AA meetings a week. There was just, what there was horrific. There was no way I was going to get well and not die of alcoholism if I ended up in the hometown where I came from. Not going to happen. To live, I had to stay in London. To stay in London, I had to pay rent. To pay rent, I had to keep a job. To keep a job, I had to show up for the job at 7 a.m. in the morning, because I was in a state where the only job I could find was the sort of job where you have to be there at 7 a.m. in the morning. And if you're late once, you're out. To get up and be ready working at 7 a.m., I had to be sober the night before. And no one was going to save me. No one was going to pick me up. AA members had stopped taking me in. For a while, I would literally knock on people's door at midnight and say, the orphan with the big eyes and the broken wing, let me in. I don't know anyone else who can help me. You can help me though, just for a little bit until I get myself straightened out. Everyone let go. And I realized there was this cold, hard calculation with all of the relapsing and slipping. Oh, because I'm powerless. Yeah, but I had AA at that point. I was not helpless. There was a little calculation where I thought, if I have another slip, I may never get back and I may blow everything. And it's funny how that changed my attitude to everything going on in AA. All of my little objections dropped. I couldn't hide behind powerlessness once a solution was on offer. So I don't buy that from other people now either. When there is a solution on offer, yeah, you're powerless, but you're not helpless. There is power available today. If you're willing to pay the price. And this is, the Bill story is wonderful on this. The program is radical, it's far-reaching, it's root and branch. It involves complete abandonment of everything you think is real and true. And the bad news for the Al-Anons, this applies to us too. So I've been having a go at the poor old alcoholic. I'm going to have a go at myself as an Al-Anon now. And now what's coming is not pretty. So hold on to your horses and buckle up. So to recap before we get there, I'm powerless over other people's alcoholism. I'm powerless over whether or not they get well. I'm powerless over whether they relapse. I'm powerless over how much they drink. I'm powerless over what they do when they're drinking. I'm powerless over the alcoholics who my reaction to whom in my childhood rewired me and made me this broken, dysfunctional creature. I'm powerless over the fact that that took place. I'm powerless over, this is before the program, powerless over my reaction to alcoholics, addicts, and crazy people. I am as powerless over myself as I am over the alcoholic, trapped in automated patterns which do not work. They're trapped in the automated pattern of have to have a drink, have to have more drinks, do crazy stuff. I'm trapped in automated patterns of belief, thinking, and behavior that I did not ask for, but it's my responsibility to do something about. And I'm going to look at what those patterns are. So what I do on the Al-Anon step 1 side is I look at the powerlessness over my own responses to situations. And it works on 2 levels. It's not just those automated reactions when you catch yourself shouting without intending to, or doing other neat stuff without intending to. It's getting into situations which last for months or years. And there's a line in Bill's story, the mental fog descends. And afterwards you think, how can I have been so crazy? And you can be in it for months, praying and meditating, but on a God almighty Al-Anon slip. Some of my patterns, and if you heard me from an Al-Anon thing on Saturday, some of this is going to be a repetition, so I apologize for that. And I always lead in with this, a fool returns to his folly like a dog returns to his own vomit. So I ran as fast as I could away from the alcoholics that were in my immediate environment when I grew up. And I went to boarding school in the countryside. I was so pleased to get away because of there were some wonderful people, but there were some dreadful people as well who bullied me, adult alcoholics. I get to London. What do? I managed to produce my own collection of alcoholics within weeks. I recreate the very situation I just escaped from. A fool returns to his folly like a dog returns to his own vomit. And in a very real sense, which I'm going to describe, I was addicted to being bullied. I was addicted to being in entangled relationships with all sorts of weird dynamics with alcohol. Alcoholics are amazing candidates. If you want an intense, complicated, devastating relationship, just go to the nearest bar and dress well. You know, it's not hard. These entanglements, I have the ability to spot people who are up for them. As a friend of mine says, he can sniff them out through lead. I can tell them from 100 paces. Someone walks into a room, your eyes lock, you know that in 6 months' time, you're going to be calling the police. Another friend of mine says, alcoholics, they're a lot of fun until they're not. Gil, who was a friend of Tom's, he was a French-Canadian doctor in AA, and he describes alcoholism like this: alcoholism, she has 3 phases. The first phase is the fun phase. That's where you're having fun. The second phase is fun plus problems. That's where you're having problems. Your first DUI, you get sacked, but you're still having fun. The third phase of alcoholism, problems. And you'd think when you hit the problem phase, you'd hit the delete button or the escape button. I don't. I stay in there trying to fix it. No one else thinks it can be fixed. I think I can fix it. So my Alanonism runs through the same phases, the same cycles as the alcoholic's alcoholism. That's why understanding the cycles of alcoholism really helps with understanding my Alanonism. That when the touch paper has been lit, it's just got to work its way through the system. What else? It's not just those sort of complicated relationships with drinking alcoholics. Sober alcoholics can be a wonderful source of reenactment of childhood trauma. There's a particular type of recovering alcoholic who's now got their life together, but they're completely emotionally shut down apart from the occasional outbursts of uncontrollable rage and then silent treatment. And I went through this particular cycle for years. It stopped only when my father died, and then I made the connection. Everyone else had seen the connection for years. I was recreating with sober alcoholics in AA my relationship with my father, who was quiet and shut down and bouts of rage, and he was an addict, I believe, of a particular description. I won't go into details. Who was keeping it all under wraps. He wasn't well, but it was kept all out of view. The other alcoholics in my childhood as well, but that was another pattern that I recreated again and again and again. The mental obsession with the alcoholic is that with the alcohol when you're an alcoholic is this time it's going to be great, this time it's going to be fine, this time I'll get home without getting into scrapes, this time I'll get home without overspending, just whatever, this time it'll be fine, this time I won't overshoot. I'm like that with my alcoholics. This time it'll be wonderful. This time I'll make the relationship work. This time, you know, I was always looking for fixers up, people I could fix up, flip and move on to the next one. A friend of mine describes this pattern. You get a new prospect and it's a mixture of excitement and dread because it's another project, but you know what you're going to get. But you can't admit that to yourself, that there's this kind of sick dread inside. And a friend of mine uses the two images for the difference between what you think you're going to get when you're in the mental obsession and what you do get. The two images are these: the Ming vase with turnip juice in it, the Chinese lacquered box you buy from the flea market. It's beautiful. You open it, you get home, you open it, and inside there is a dead spider. I have gone to bars, come back with so many Chinese lacquered boxes only to open them up to find a dead spider inside. One particular, and this is where it may drift, it may tip over into codependency. There's a term that gets used in A Course in Miracles, which I find very, very helpful, the special relationship. Now, if you've ever had a special relationship, that phrase, even if you've not read A Course in Miracles, that phrase may already have some resonance for you. This is how it works. I feel like a piece of dirt. I feel like I'm worthless. I feel like I'm nothing. But I find someone who's like sparkly and pretty. And if I can get them to sign on the dotted line, if I can get into some kind of deal with them and move in or get them to move in, I can glue myself to this special person. I can trade my worthlessness for their specialness, and then I will be okay. Then I'll be able to conquer the world, and we'll live in our little castle up on the hill, safe, secure, protected, just him and me, and we're going to be fine. And I know I'm broken, but with his specialness, I will heal. That's the deal. That's how it works. And then you get them home, and then you realize they were playing the same gambit that you were. They temporarily saw some sparkle in you. and they were trading their worthlessness for your specialness. It's like exchanging Christmas presents, and inside there is nothing there. And that's when the war starts, because you feel cheated, but you know you've cheated the other person too. I know there are a couple of people who are identifying. Everyone else, maybe you'll sponsor someone one day who has this pattern. You know, it happens occasionally. And the people, the candidates I had for these types of relationship, I use the term very loosely, they're not real relationships, they're sort of transactional entanglements. They're scenarios for reenacting every past trauma, rolling them all up into one ball, thinking this time I'll get the ending to change, and the ending doesn't change. An acquaintance of mine, I think when he was driving his third or his fourth girlfriend in 1 year to the accident and emergency room to have her stomach pumped, different girlfriends, even he realized there was a pattern here. Another entanglement I would get into is it's something I call hero martyr. And you can do this with organizations, you can do this with employees, you can play this game in intimate relationships, in friendships, with sponsees. If you have sponsees, you can play this game with sponsees. By game, I mean a kind of almost ritualized sequence of moves. It doesn't mean it's fun. It just means there's a secret payoff. And the idea is, I want to fix you. I want to save you. This is what you're going to do. And you think, once I've fixed and saved this person, I'm going to be the hero. And what do heroes become? Saints. But if it fails, it's your fault. Then I'm the martyr for having sacrificed so much for you. And this is how you repay me. And what do martyrs become? Saints. So the hero becomes the saint. The martyr becomes the saint. If I win, I'm a saint. If I fail, I'm a saint. I can't possibly lose. This is why this game is so popular in Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step fellowships. Because the failure is then someone, have you ever been at a meeting where someone goes out and drinks and everyone gets angry and says, I guess they just didn't want it enough. That's that game playing out. They've betrayed us, all the help we gave them, and people won't say it overtly, but if there is anger when someone relapses, if there is the slightest annoyance, this little game is going on. Hero martyr. So you get the credit, you're so proud. If you're proud when your sponsee is a year sober, you've got a problem, because it wasn't you that did it. It was the higher power that did it. You're the dinner lady, you're not the dinner, and you're not the chef. It ain't your achievement if they get well and get sober. It ain't your failure if you don't. If you feel anything other than just a sort of distanced compassion, and anything other than just being pleased for them as another human being, if there's any personal involvement, you've got a little game of hero martyr going on, or at least I have when I'm in that state. Who knows what's going on with anyone else? What's so delicious about this, Tom, who's an Al-Anon member, taught me about this. The reason why it's so exciting to focus on someone else's problems is I don't have to look at my own unresolved crap. Now, there's obviously a benefit in having some perspective. You go and help other people, you realize your problems are not as big as you thought they were. You know, they're not VIPs, they're not very important problems. But it can go to the other extreme where I can be so involved in service and helping that really major addictive patterns in my life just don't get noticed because I'm busy with other people. So I don't have to look at me, and you have the power. And the thing about this game is for every person that wants to rescue, there is someone that wants to be rescued. So you can always find someone to play the game. There is another, there's another game that I played in the recovery world. And the recovery world is a great place to play it, because in the real world, people don't put up with this crap, this crap being what I'm about to tell you. So I had not the worst childhood, but there were some pretty gruesome, harrowing things that happened. As I said, there are lots of people that had worse. I'm not going to elaborate on the details here. In my early recovery meetings, I would insist on sharing at extreme length. By extreme, I mean 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. The ins, this was a long time ago. It's 27 years ago, 28 years ago, 29 years ago. Before we had people holding up cards and ringing bells and doing all the other things that they do now to shut people down. Quite rightly, by the way, in my view. But anyway, they didn't have any of that. So you just spoke for as long as you wanted to. The custom was to speak for 5 to 10 minutes, but I would go on for 15, 20, going into excruciatingly explicit detail. I'll just leave that there, about what happened to me as a kid. And I tell you, much more fun to do that in a room of alcoholics and untreated Al-Anons and watch everyone squirm than to actually go to a psychotherapist or whatever, or a sponsor, and deal with it, where someone will be able to respond and challenge. Of course, it's a meeting setting. There's no cross-sharing. So no one got to come back. No one got to respond. And I would hold rooms of people hostage with this stuff. I haven't even got to the sick bit. I would work out what the meeting's boundary was and then push it. There's a line in Peanuts where someone says to Lucy, how many times does 4 go into 3? And oh no, Lucy says to someone, how many times does 4 go into 3? And he says, 4 doesn't go into 3. And she said, it does if you push. And I pushed. My game is work out where the boundary is, push it. I would elicit some kind of response, either anger or boundary setting, or people would queue up after meetings telling me to behave or whatever. Groups had group consciences about me. There's nothing more delicious. If you want to play a room, find a way to push their boundaries and cause them to have a group conscience about your behavior. But then, because of my childhood, which was the shield, I was the victim of this group which was now bullying me. And once it had played through, usually it played through by me either being excluded or I would actually tone down. I'd take the story to another group and say, at my last group, this happened, but I know that you're different and you're kind and you're loving. Blah, blah, blah. And the point about this victimhood, it wasn't my fault as a kid that I was in situations which, well, you're a kid, you're a victim, you have no agency. What's interesting is when you're an adult and you recreate the very scenarios with exactly the same dynamics that you just escaped from. So this is my Alanonism codependency in absolutely full, floridness. Where even when there's no one, none of the original alcoholics are there, none of the original bullies are there. I've left, I'm in a different place, I'm in a different country, but I recreate the thing that I left because there is a payoff. With the alcoholic drinking, with me as an alcoholic drinking, there is a payoff. What is the payoff? It's release from the material world, accessing a higher realm. My Al-Anon side, the payoff when I re-victimize myself is, for a brief period, all of my shame, my guilt, my low self-worth is like in a form of alchemy, is turned into this holy innocence. All my darkness is projected out onto you, and you're the bullies, you're the people who are mistreating me, and I now have the narrative to go with it. I've even misused recovery stuff, Al-Anon stuff, codependency stuff, inner child stuff to actually bolster the problem that I'm trying to recover from. I can use recovery language to present myself as the holy innocent surrounded by victimizers. But the whole thing, in my case, is a game where I'm desperate for a payoff. The payoff is this moment of relief when I am the holy innocent, and the evil, the darkness, it's all out there. And I will go, that's why I would go back again and again and again. The other thing is, the alcoholics and the addicts, when they're drunk, as I say, seem to access a higher realm. Jung talks about this in his correspondence with Bill W. That they're seeking God, alcoholics are seeking God, and they find it in a sort of substitute form temporarily in alcohol. And when I'm in an untreated condition, I need access to power. And if I can't find a source of power in me, I'll find a source of power in you. So this is why, you see, alcoholics, when they're drunk, they can sparkle. And when your life has no sparkle, you'll put up with a lot. I would put up with a lot for that little bit of sparkle, that little bit of release, that trapdoor out of the mundane existence. In a lot of my life, it's different now. I actually really like boring people, but non-alcoholics, non-Al-Anons, it's just such a relief at times. Let's just have a normal conversation about the Archers or something else. Radio drama, if you're American, the Archers. Anyway, this was my problem as an Al-Anon. I found ordinary life dull. At least if there is excitement, I feel alive. I don't care if I'm suffering, at least I'm alive. Without the identity of my dark past, who am I even? Who's in there? I had no idea. Another reason why I kept going back. Just another couple of things. So, as I say, I suffered genuine trauma as a child. Fine. But I learned how to use that. I saw a super nanny program. You know, those programs where problem families hire in this super nanny to kind of fix the situation. Never works long term, but anyway, makes for good TV. And there was this family where there was, you know, older child, younger child, parents. The younger child was the nightmare. I identified hugely. Tantrums, screaming, shouting, wailing. I just identified right down the line with this younger child. And the parents said to the super nanny, why do you think he's so traumatized? We just have no idea because, you know, we've done everything by the book. The other kids are fine. Why is this happening? And the super nanny said, and this obviously I have no opinion on this actual situation. I don't know what was going on there, but talking about my identification with it. She said, oh, honey, he's not traumatized. You're traumatized. He's in control. So I'm really, and I can still do it today. I can take a crisis situation, a difficult situation, and turn it into a drama to get everyone else to dance around me. So there are low-level ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be super dramatic. The big book is also helpful as this is the last, we're into the final run here, there'll be room for questions. The big book is immensely helpful on the question of responsibility, about drawing a very clear dividing line between I am responsible for my inner world, for my beliefs, thoughts, and actions. You are responsible for your inner world, your beliefs, your thoughts, your actions. And I'm just going to cite a few places where this occurs. In the chapter Working with Others, it's made very clear it is up to the individual to decide whether or not they want to get well, and if so, whether they want to use AA, whether they want to ask you for help or follow their... No pressure whatsoever. It must come from them. You are not responsible for them. There's a wonderful story in the back of the big book where a chap runs across an AA member, and he tells him his woes. The AA member, I think it's our southern friend, the AA member says, "Are you willing to go to any lengths?" Lists a few of the things, and the bloke says yes, and the AA person leaves the room. He says, in that case, all of your problems are solved, and he leaves the room. He gives him the tools, and then he's off. Page 25, you lay the spiritual tools at someone's feet. It is up to them to pick them up. I'm responsible for giving my part. You're responsible for what you do with it. Page 118, you don't get to criticize anyone else. You demonstrate through your behavior, whatever characteristics you want the other person to display, you live those yourself. You display the virtues that you would like to see in others. Pages 98 to 99 contains been married with someone for 18 years. Very happy. We've never argued, thanks to AA and Al-Anon. Just going to leave that point there. 98 to 99 tells me everything I need to know about relationships. Fault finding and criticism are to be avoided like the plague. My job is to be sober, considerate, and helpful, regardless of what the other person says and does. I am responsible for me. You are responsible for you. Even when there's an absolute cluster F, page 62, where, and then, page 67, 68, where did I set the ball rolling? Where did I make a decision based on self that later placed me in a position to be hurt? Where I make a decision based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt? Page 67, you get over the resentment at the top of the page by praying to have the judgment removed, and then you leave the other person aside altogether. And here's the wonderful line, our troubles, we think, are of our own making. It's not my fault I got this way, but my continued disturbance as an adult, my continued failure to fire on all pistons, the constant misfiring in my life is not down to anyone but me. Chap in East London AA many years ago said, if you slap me around the face, that's your problem. If I continue to be aggrieved at the fact you slapped me around the face, that's my problem. Every time I remember your slap and I suffer because of that, I am doing that to me. You are not doing that to me. I am doing that to me. Now, how does this relate to Alanonism? Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm glad you asked. My Alanonism, stroke codependency, is all about getting this sense of responsibility wrong. So rather than I'm responsible for me, you're responsible for you. Let's have a nice day. Shall we have lunch? Yes, great. No, fine. Rather than that, it's I'm not, and I'll go into these in detail, I'm not responsible for me, but I am responsible for you. You're not responsible for you, but you are responsible for me. I'll give you an example of how this was drilled into me. My alcoholic brother committed suicide on my mother's birthday, and the suicide note blamed her. So that's going to create a dynamic in the family. And I was told explicitly by my family that if I did well at school, it would take my mother's pain away. This was not a subliminal message. Those were the literal words from more than one relative. I, as the younger brother of this, I was 11. The younger brother of the suicided alcoholic was responsible for my mother's actual mental health. And everyone thought this was fine. Everyone thought this was normal. So I'm not, this is my whole Al-Anon stroke codependency problem. I'm not responsible for me. I am responsible for you. You're not responsible for you, but you are responsible for me. And I like to make Jim W. in San Antonio talks. I get a lot of my stuff from. He got sober in 1957, still sober, still alive. Sober and alive, in that order. He talks about you can give your character defects names to make it a bit light. But the character defects, they're not me. They're just roles that I play. So my job is to identify the role and stop playing it. I'm not responsible for me. There are a couple of roles. The first one is Snow White. You know, the perfect little princess. As I said the other day, my first sponsor's nickname for me was Princess Parfait. There's nothing ever stuck. And I did do as I was told, but nothing ever stuck. Not looking after my own life. I remember at one point in my 20s realizing that the stuff in my room was about 1.5 feet deep of just whatever. And I thought I really should tidy my room at some point. It was a while before I got round to that. I was busy with an alcoholic somewhere. I don't know what was going on, but not looking after myself on really basic levels. I don't know what I did for food for many years. I think it was mostly kebabs and kiwi fruit. They both began with K. A Lacanian would do something with that. I don't know what, but I had no idea. And not only did I have no idea, I didn't care, which was weird because I was super interested in how other people treated me, but I wasn't interested in how I treated me because I'm not responsible for me. You're responsible for me. If I feel bad, it's your behavior. It's never my behavior. I am, however, this is part of the illness. I am, however, responsible for you. And I've got to be careful about doing this today. Have you ever joined a new group and within 8 minutes of joining the new group, you've got proposals for a group conscience meeting? You know exactly what needs to change in the group to fix it so that it suits you. I'm the string puller, the bulldozer, the manager, the manipulator. Al-Anon talks about the 4 M's: managing, manipulating, mothering, and martyrdom. And it always blows up in my face. You know, I've had whole group consciences round on me because of my manipulative tactics in the background. But also there's another aspect of this, there's the prime mover. So if you're in a bad mood, it must be my fault. So if my other half is in a bad mood, of course it's me. And I literally on a bad day, when I don't realize what I'm doing, when the old pattern gets activated, I tiptoe, because if he's in a bad mood, it must be my fault. He's never shouted at me. But I act towards him in those situations like he is the shouter from 1985. It's like 1984, but just add a year, 1985. They're horrific. I react to normal people like I learned to react to alcoholics. If you're upset, not only is it my fault, because it's my fault, I have to fix it. You're not responsible for you. The apologist, the doormat. I don't know if anyone has seen Oliver, the character Nancy, who sings this song, basically she's saying, I know he treats me terribly, he's drunk, he's awful, but he needs me so. So she puts up with it. The apologist, discounting, disregarding, pretending it's not important. And I told this story the other day. I was, and this is the thing about Al-Anon slips, they can happen at they really can happen at any time in recovery. I was in double digits in recovery when the following story happened. A friend of mine having a little bit more non-habit forming Valium than was strictly good for him. His family were visiting, we were at dinner. There was me, him, the sister, and the brother-in-law. My friend, I realize he's going over, so I have to push him back up so he's upright in his seat, he's kind of lolling around. And I hear myself saying, as though someone else is saying it, he's tired, he's had a long week. Not, he's had 3 blister packs of Valium he bought off someone who calls herself Sherry from Macedonia. That was the truth. He hadn't had a long week, he hadn't been to work that week. The ease with which I lie about the alcoholic, because if you think ill of them, you're going to think ill of me for being with them. So I have to make excuses for them. Otherwise, I'm the douchebag with the alcoholic. So I can't let anyone else see that the alcoholic is in the middle of one. This is almost embarrassing. Okay, it gets worse. You know, at home, so in public, it's the apologist. At home, I'm the caretaker. I'm the Florence Nightingale. But also, and this is where it gets sinister, Kathy Bates in Misery. There is an unconscious desire to keep them sick because then you keep them under your control. And I remember once when one person I knew went into a treatment center, I was disappointed because I was no longer the one that was helping. So embarrassing when you realize that that is going on. Little flip, you know, it's one's motivations are not clear and clean. There are lots of things going on at once, but that was in there. A little bit of disappointment that the project was now out of my hands. As if he got well, it wouldn't be me that did it. Wow. This is why I go to a lot of Al-Anon meetings. And then finally, you're responsible for me, the blame thrower. If I feel bad, it's your fault. A Miss Havisham, who's 60 years after being jilted at the altar, or 40 years or whatever, is still sitting in her wedding dress with the rotting cake on the table because she refuses to let go. And the being jilted at the wedding is it's her whole identity. This is why I did not want to get well at some level, because my identity was so tied up in all of this. And finally, the damsel in distress. If anyone remembers Wacky Races and Penelope Pitstop crying, help, help. And then all the, you know, the keys, I can't remember what they call that, little crowd of men would come and rescue her. I can play the other side of all of these games. I can be that rather than the rescuer, I can be the person that desperately tries to be rescued. I'll give you an example. I had a bad day yesterday, poor me, and it's all dealt with, fine. But I tried to get sympathy from my other half, and he's onto this. I said, I did the puppy dog face. I said, I've had a bad day. He said, well, I've had a bad day too, and he left the room. Because he knew what was going on. Now, 20 minutes later, we did talk about it. There wasn't a lot to say. He knows I'm pretty much self-basting. I didn't need his input on anything. I got a sponsor, it's fine. So, you know, he'd had a bad day, as I gave him his dinner and rubbed his back. There we go. And I had a bad day, and I told him, I said, okay, these are the 4 problems. These are the 4 solutions I applied. He said, well done. That was the end of it. But these things are all still there. The software is intact. One day at a time, I get to not activate the software. So that was a whole mess of stuff. I don't know if anyone got anything out of that, but we've got 20 minutes or so for questions. So I'll hand it back to you, Patrick, to introduce that element of the session.
We can't hear you, Patrick. Can't hear you. Speak up.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm going to get this over pretty quick. We're going to have a quick meeting after. Anybody who wants to stay on is welcome. We're just going to talk about the WhatsApp group, and we're trying to get people connected, sponsors, sponsees. That's the whole idea of this thing. So if you're available to sponsor or looking for a sponsor, put that information in the chat, and or you can send it to me direct. I'll put it on the, try and get you hooked up with some of our sponsor coordinators. And then we have 3 male, 3 female. And then Q&A is open. Raise the hand, virtual hand, or send it direct to Tim if you don't want your voice recorded. And Tim, I'm going to turn that portion now over to you. 2 minutes on the questions, please. And we get as many in as we can. And Jules will be the timer. Thank you, Jules. Thank you, Tim. Over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. So Katie, do you want to come in with your question?
Oh, it's not a question, sorry. I had to stay in the end. I thought I had to leave at 7, but I was, it was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Millie, would you like to? Oh, sorry. There we go.
Forgive me. Yeah. Apologies.
Millie.
Apologies. Finished.
So Millie, would you like to come in with your question?
Yes, Tim, thanks. Great. Just absolutely loved your talk, and I was sitting here smiling and smiling and smiling, recognizing myself. One of the things I've learned over the years is that so much of my codependency and so much of my untreated Al-Anon is about expectations. Do you see a connection there?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So big book. On page 66, it talks about fighting to have our own way. All of that emotional disturbance that gets written about in the resentment inventory, which is on pages 63 to 67, comes from, it doesn't cut, you see, I thought my upset came from other people's bad behavior. It doesn't. It comes from other people's behavior, good or bad, coming up against, banging up against my way, how I think things should be. And the introduction is on 60 to 62. This idea that the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. If I've got an idea for how things should be, the universe is going to bang up against it. And then as soon as I'm resentful, as soon as I'm full of that animus, that's where the spiritual sickness starts and everything else goes to rot. So expectations is another word for demands. And the demands are me playing God, which is the thing that has to stop. So short version, yes, Millie, expectations, absolutely. Jean, you got a question?
Yes, Tim, it was absolutely great. I really loved the whole thing. Recognized myself a lot, my friends, people in Al-Anon groups and other groups. But I wasn't clear on the alchemy bit when you said about release from the material world, accessing a higher realm. It was about the holy innocence. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things there which I'll go on. I want to talk for weeks about both of those ideas. So, as my memory of alcohol when it worked, it was as though the veil between me and other people was dissolved, and I felt I could finally connect to other people. But then, because of the amount I drank, the brick walls would shoot up in the place of what had been thin veils before. So it gave me a glimpse of connection from other people to other people. But then it took, there's a wonderful line in the big book. It says, it's a terrible poem, but it's a good point. Alcohol gave me wings to fly, but then it took away the sky. So it gives
Right.
this sense of transcendence. On the holy innocence side of things, being having a victim narrative, which is so much of what my history has been. And you see it in politics. You see each side thinking it's a victim of the other side. You see it everywhere in the world. It's the whole narrative of the world. The great holy grail there is to be the innocent one, because when you're innocent and the darkness is outside, you're off scot-free. It's as though when I'm left with my own responsibility, in an untreated condition, I feel separated, I feel distinct from other people, I feel there's something wrong with me. Now, there is nothing wrong with me except the illusion that I'm separate from the higher power and that I'm separate from other people. That automatically, that feeling of separation automatically brings down feelings of guilt, stroke, shame, and fear. And that's intolerable. That intolerable feeling, the way I temporarily get rid of it is projecting out all that darkness, and I see it in other people. So all I see, I'm the perfect one surrounded by all these dark people with internal darkness, with problems.
Right.
And in that moment, I'm released. We've got a few more questions. Darren.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi Tim. Hello everyone. Thank you for your talk. I just had a quick question. I just wanted to ask if you could clarify. I think you said it quite early on in your talk. It was about sort of helping the alcoholic, and I think, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you said it's very detrimental to the alcoholic to help support because they need to hit rock bottom. And if you support, I think you said they'll die. That if they hit rock bottom and pull themselves out, they may die, they may recover. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it depends one has to judge each case separately. So these ideas can't be used as blunt tools. It matters very much what stage someone is in. If my experience with alcoholics in my life, if they want to get well, I will do anything to help them access help which genuinely helps them. The danger is when I take an alcoholic and I basically cushion their fall, and I mop up the emotional consequences of the relapse. It's where it has no consequences. In Al-Anon, and there's an awful lot of material in Al-Anon about this. This is why one can't do this in isolation if one has a problem in this area. This is why I've needed so many Al-Anon meetings and Al-Anon books and Al-Anon people and tapes and all of these wonderful things. Because one thing is very clear from the Al-Anon experience, there isn't a single solution which matches every situation. Each situation must be judged differently. And I've collected a set of tools in Al-Anon, and the job is to work out which tool to apply in which situation, when to offer support, when support is going to be really unhelpful, when to listen, and when the listening is done and the action needs to start. It has to be judged. It requires a lot of skill. It takes a long time to acquire the skill. And this is why the important thing is to get people, if you can, to at least consider a fellowship, so that there's a whole range of people. So I'm no longer carrying, I don't want to carry another alcoholic. I can take them to a meeting.
I just sort of maybe felt it would. So I was going to say, just for me, I think maybe I just took it too black and white, just very, very quickly. My mother is an alcoholic and she did not want to recover. Even I went at a very young age with my dad to try and get her into rehab. She didn't want to go. And for my sins, I'm also an alcoholic, but I have continue to give my mum the support because I don't want her to be dead. And I have my partner and I have people around me that are supporting me, or else I would be dead. I do know that for a fact. But I think I just took it very black and white, what you said.
That's right. Yeah. So there's nothing is to be taken as directly applicable to a single situation, but each situation is its own constellation. Good. Mitch.
Hi, good evening. I was just wondering if I can talk to someone, not for advice, just to like thrash it out with someone, because I'm going through a bit of a situation in AA right now. And, you know, I just need an unbiased opinion. Not looking for a sponsor, and I'm not looking for a sponsee. It's just, I need a bit of advice. I can't divulge about the situation here, unfortunately, for the sake of anonymity. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say. And thanks for the talk. I identified with many things you said. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kelly, would you like to come in?
Hi, Tim. Fantastic talk. And you may have touched on this. I was having some computer problems about which program you got into first. But my question was, how did working one program help you in working the other program and vice versa, or did it? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't that long after I joined AA that I found myself, some would say, reduced to going to Al-Anon. I think of it as an upgrade. I was upgrading my experience to do both. I found myself in endless situations in my 20s. I got sober when I was 21. Endless situations which mirrored all of the alcoholic situations in my childhood. And I found myself acting out with alcoholics. I don't mean sexual. I mean that, you know, acting out the ism, and particularly in service. I mean, I remember being in an intergroup meeting or a region meeting, something like that, when I was about 12 years sober. And there was trouble with the treasury, you know, those situations where there was trouble with the treasury, and there were 4 or 5 people that were super angry. And I realized I had stopped breathing. I was holding my breath. And Tom explained it to me. He said, deer in the woods, if they sense danger, they don't want to breathe, because if they breathe, they'll be heard, they'll be spotted, and something's going to snack on them. So I was still reacting to alcoholics who were angry as though they posed a threat to me. Now, the truth is I can look after myself perfectly well. There was an incident with a very angry alcoholic at dinner after an AA meeting at Fellowship. He came in, a lot bigger than me, on the warpath, about to have a go at someone. And I don't know how I did it, but apparently I have the instinct. I managed to turn around, push him out of the door. And that was the end of that. We call the police. So I can deal with it. But the emotional reaction was still there. Al-Anon has helped me be in AA and sponsor people without throwing myself down the stairs and without pushing them down the stairs. A friend of mine in Al-Anon says, I want to help people, and if they won't be helped, I want to hurt them. And it's an ugly truth, but that's not an uncommon reaction in the sponsorship situation. So the two things feed into each other hugely. You know, I'm messed up on both sides, which is why I do both fellowships. I'm just going to see if there are any messages and any questions in the chat. I'm not sure there are, but so Patrick, I think it looks like we're out of questions unless someone else wants to put their hand up. Oh, someone asked, one of the stories in particular I would read to understand this very kind of hands-off approach where just placing the solution at people's feet, but not forcing it on them. It's Our Southern Friend. I do want to say just one other little thing, because I think it's so important. I don't think my answer did it justice. This idea of what does detachment mean? And that's a whole topic in Al-Anon. Go to 100,000 Al-Anon meetings and detachment will be the topic at many of them. And there's a little, Al-Anon has this flyer, little 2-page number called detachment. And it's amazing. It's like the whole program boiled down to a few lines. So it's not necessarily about just running for the hills, but it's not about coddling the person either. It's about finding a path in between the two. And a really helpful, I'm going to tell a general point and then a story. I don't do for the alcoholic what they can do for themselves. But if there's something they can't do for themselves, I will help them. So if they don't know how to find a detox, and I know a friend who's on the inside of the detox system, I will put the alcoholic in touch with the friend and they can figure that out, how to get the person into detox. It's not the fact of helping, it's the type of help. And the boundaries around the help. It's whether, also it's got a lot to do with whether the person is being aggressive towards me and violent. That's a very different situation than when someone is elderly or vulnerable or mentally impaired. There are all sorts of, there's so many factors involved here about figuring out when and how to help. But there was a situation many years ago where I woke up in the middle of the night, looked at my phone. There was a message from an AA member who said that he'd slit his wrists. And I called up, he answered. And we had a talk for about 5-10 minutes. I established that he was high on Valium and some other things, non-habit forming. And we established that he'd hacked at his arms, but there was blood everywhere, but he wasn't dying. He hadn't hit an artery. He didn't need an ambulance. I think he went to the emergency room the next day, but he wasn't in immediate danger. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, other side of London. So I said, "You're not in danger. Okay, I'll speak to you tomorrow. Get to a doctor tomorrow and get yourself looked at." If there hadn't been an answer, I would have phoned the police, said, "Look, I've got this suicide thing from someone. You're going to go and can someone go around, knock the door down, pull him out?" But what I wasn't going to do is go over to his flat and keep him company. So it's looking after what needs to be looked after. An Al-Anon story is this is one of the famous detachment stories. Woman comes to Al-Anon and they tell her to detach. And what she'd been doing was dragging her husband, her drunk husband, up the stairs to bed every night. And they said, detach. And so she just left him next time he did that, came home drunk, lying in the middle of the hall. She left him there. And they said, "No, it's detached with love, honey." So the next time she left him there in the hall, but she put a blanket over him. So it's not necessarily one, it's not necessarily the other. Sometimes I go to enormous lengths to help people. Sponsorship is one of those ways. There are other times I won't touch a situation with a barge pole, but I make sure there's a range of people around that they can go to someone else, if not me. Lynn, you got a question?
Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you. Sorry to be off video. I got to keep it off for the audio. Just love listening to you. I'm curious, when you have a partner situation, asking for a friend, of course, but if you have a situation where, okay, so I'm in AA. I started to go to Al-Anon in the last 3 years. It's blowing my mind. It's fantastic. My husband has been dabbling in Al-Anon. I feel like I keep let's see. How does, when somebody's behaviors actually have some concrete consequences, for instance, I feel like I'm overwhelmed a lot with I'm taking on a lot of stuff, whether it has to do with the mortgage or the house or things that need to be done, or, you know, on and on. And he often drops the ball or doesn't do it, or says he's going to do it and not do it. And I can't take care of everything. So if somebody is not changing their behavior and it actually has real consequences, not just the way I feel about it, I'm not sure what I do there. You know, it doesn't feel like it's a thing where I can just go, oh, well, they're going to do them. And I just, because I can't handle everything. Does that?
Yeah, a couple of things. The first few years in Al-Anon can be pretty annoying because you want to get clear, concrete answers. Do I do this or do I do that? And no one will tell you. And I love this about Al-Anon. That people have never told me exactly what to do in a situation. I'll tell you why. It's because I'm the one that has to live with the consequences. If they tell me what to do and I obey it, it's shifting responsibility. And concept 10 is about responsibility and authority going together. The Al-Anon literature also talks about people will respond practically to the same situation very differently. In almost identical situations, one person will stay and another person will leave. I'm going to give the answer that Tom always gives me to specific situations. And I think I told this story a couple of days ago. I send these sort of long, complex questions to Tom, and he, about a day later, he writes back, go to 100,000 Al-Anon meetings. And once I complained, and he said, go to 200,000 Al-Anon meetings. And it takes a long time to reason these things out. But my sponsor said one thing as well: arrive at a position of peace and then decide. Because if you're not at peace, you won't know whether you're responding based on emotion or responding based on reasoning things out. So it's an annoying answer because it's